Beverley Web.
Shh. Silence. Shame. Stigma. I lived with these words from a very young age into my adulthood. So let's have a look in the adult world. And let me give you a fact. Did you know in business, the biggest cost to any business is sickness due to stress, either long-term or short-term? And the biggest cause of that stress is recent or non-recent trauma. Yes, that's right. The highest age is between the age of 34 and 54. And this correlates with the British Psychological Society figures as well for non-recent disclosure of childhood abuse or trauma. There's a fact here as well, that when the abuse or trauma stops, on average it takes 16 years before anyone is able to find a voice and disclose to someone. So let me take you back. It's 1980, Christmas, and it's December. And actually I'm living in Beverley, Kent, in a hostel, 16 years of age, and it's Christmas Day. And sitting around the Christmas table are 5 other vulnerable young people. And as I look around, I think to myself, how do we all feel? And I want to use my voice and I don't know how. I want to let the NSPCC, the world, know how I'm feeling, how they're feeling, what we're really about. Because the stigma around us is massive. So I can't tell you how the others got there, but I'll share with you how I got there. At the age of 4, the police van pulled up, and back then it was a Black Mariah. And it took my mum, myself and 2 siblings, and we were taken to Penge Police Station. Following then, we were taken by social workers to a children's home in Orpington, Kent. Now that children's home sounds very scary to some people, and sometimes haven't you as parents threatened your child with the thought of going to a children's home? Well, I can tell you, luckily for me, that was the best decision. So for the next 6 years I spent in a children's home called Avonstow, and today I am the woman I am because of the women in my life. However, every other weekend we'd take it in turns to go home and spend the weekend with my mum and dad in their bedsit with, by now, 2 other younger siblings. At the age of 10, my mum and dad were awarded a new council house with 3 bedrooms. I still today remember the joy of my mum jumping up and down outside the council offices because she'd got this new home. And we were told, you're going to go back home and live with your mum and dad. Isn't that fantastic? I was the eldest of 6 siblings by now. I was 10. And for 3 nights, when I went to bed, I'd wake up absolutely sobbing and having night terrors. But I was going home. That's the best thing to do. Within 2 years, I was the main carer. That made me 12. And the following year, when I was 13, in 1977, for those of you who haven't worked out the maths, the first thing to go for the services was the electric. Being ever resourceful, I asked my dad to cut the lead off of the iron so I could put it on the gas stove and iron the clothes. Because I still wanted to keep up the momentum. We wanted to wear a uniform to school, we wanted to look normal, be part of normal society. Wasn't long after that, the gas was closed off. So no gas, no electricity, That's okay. That's what they have colour gas for. Have you ever cooked a meal on a little camping stove with the little colour gas bottles? At 13, that's what I did of a weekend. That's when I made the food for my family. Meanwhile, my parents were leading a very toxic life. And when I say toxic, it was chaotic. They were both alcoholics. Not that I knew the meaning of that at that time. I just remember with my sister laughing if my mum hadn't had an alcoholic drink at lunchtime, because by tea time she'd have this tic where she was missing her drink. They were never around my parents, so we'd play outside on the street or spend the summer at Crystal Palace Adventure Playground. But luckily for us, there were a few concerned people, including our neighbours or volunteers at the playground. And so one day the NSPCC officer knocked on the door, and who was I to lie? I knew where my parents were. If they weren't in that pub, they'll be in the other one. It's obvious, isn't it? Not long afterwards, I came home from school on Wednesday the 8th of November 1977 to see one of my social workers sitting there. I say one. In 14 years I had 13 social workers. The three youngest siblings had already been taken into care, but because we were living in Croydon Borough at that time, they were taken into Croydon Borough. Our social worker took myself, my brother and my sister back to Beverley. Because when we were first taken by the police, we were actually awarded court orders under Beverley Council. So we returned to care in Beckenham and another children's home. Actually, my sister and I were so excited because we were going back to an environment that we thrived in. And yet, the outside world didn't see it like that. Because when a child goes into care and becomes a looked after child or fostered, they're often judged and they're called the kids from care. These kids, their behaviour. And so the expectations are extremely low. But you see, I wanted to be different, even back then. So at 15, I asked my social worker if I could be fostered, because I wanted to be part of a normal family. Normal? What's normal? Don't know about you, but I know when I take my kids out on a family day, we have nothing but arguments. Sadly, within a year, that fostering broke down. I didn't know how to be part of a normal family, and hence I was in the hostel at 16. But you see, again, there was choices. However, going back to that dinner table, there was a voice I wanted to use. No one had actually asked me anything. Nobody had asked if I wanted to go home. And those weekends I was being sent home back to my mum and dad every weekend. How wonderful was it? You see, my father first sexually abused me at the age of 4, before I was taken away by the police. And we were taken away for neglect and returned to our parents. So how did I turn things around? Well, you know what? As a child, surviving adverse childhood experiences, boy, have I got some survival skills. So there I was at 16 in a hostel. Within 4 years, I was in management, working. I had my first mortgage, I got my first flat. You see, in business, we talk about the word resilience, and I've got that resilience. I don't need teaching. The one thing I didn't know about was vulnerability and balance. So when it comes to work, if there's a target, oh, I can do it. I can reach that goal really easily. But one thing I won't show you is what's really inside. Well, that's okay for a short while, but something tips the balance. And we're often told to keep our outside life away from our working environment, but sometimes we can't. And sometimes that's the tip that happens. So going back to the stress, I now specialise in something called adverse childhood experiences. And there's a scoring of 1 to 10. And I can tell you now that if you score 4 or more in the scoring of ACEs, you are 32% more likely to be diagnosed with a chronic illness. However, we do have choices, and with this information, we can make a difference. So how does that affect you? You're professional working women in a business environment. It's my childhood, not yours. Well, let's think about what some trauma could be. Have you ever been bullied at school? Have you ever wanted to do something and the other girls were laughing at you? Has that held you back? Have you ever taken time out from your life now to reevaluate your values and beliefs of where you are now and not the ones you've carried through from your childhood? So I'm going to ask you to think about 3 things, 3 important things. That is always the starting point for me when I'm working with my clients. Self-care is so important. So the first question, what one thing do you do every day that's simple but nurtures you? No matter how busy you are, you do this, and no matter how you're feeling. The second thing, in your diaries, how much time have you actually put in your diary for yourself? And what part of the day is it? Because you've put all your other appointments in there, no doubt, and the families. And lastly, when was the last time you actually took time to invest in your own being, your physical, your mental, and your emotional? Because it's all part of well-being, and it's important, because without that oxygen mask on yourself and feeding your own soul, how can you function going forward with others to the best of your own wonderful abilities? So step forward with me, either in one of my coaching sessions, have a discovery call and choose the right pathway for you, or a workshop. It's that simple if you want to make the choice. I'm Beverley, looking forward to enabling you to have a voice in the way that is best for you.